The markets of Veltra were always noisy, full of bright colors and the scent of alien spices. But that day, an odd silence hung over the far corner of the square. People avoided looking there, pretending not to notice the small figure crouched behind a crate. Her skin was pale blue, thin enough that the outlines of her bones showed under it. She clutched a piece of stale bread so tightly, it seemed she feared even the air would steal it. Her name was Lyra, though no one here cared to know it. She had been wandering for weeks, slipping between alleyways, hiding from patrols who would send her to the orphan barracks. She had heard stories about those places, cold, hungry nights and cruel guards. She preferred the streets. But hunger had claws, and they were sinking deep into her. She felt weak. The stale bread in her hands would not last long. Near the center of the square, a human man was bargaining with a vendor over farming tools. His hair was streaked with gray, his hands rough from years of labor. His name was Garen, a retired cargo hauler who had settled in a small farming colony outside the city. He had come here for seeds and supplies. He was not looking for trouble. But his eyes caught a flicker of movement by the crates, and instinct pulled his gaze toward her. Lyra noticed him staring. Her first reaction was to shrink further behind the crate. She had seen humans before. They were strong, loud, and often impatient with their kind. But this one's eyes didn't have the sharp, cold edge she feared. They looked tired, but not unkind. She gripped the bread tighter and turned her head away, hoping he would lose interest. Garen didn't. Something in her frail posture, the way her shoulders shook when the wind passed, made his chest ache. He remembered another life, long ago, when he had lost someone small and fragile. His boots carried him across the square before he even thought about it. "You'll choke on that if you don't eat slower," he said in a low, calm voice. She froze, eyes wide. No one spoke to her like that, not softly, not without threat. She didn't answer, only took a defensive bite of the bread. Garen crouched down so they were at the same height. "When was your last real meal?" Her lips pressed together. She didn't want to admit the truth. He sighed and pulled something from his bag, a fresh bread roll, warm and fragrant. He held it out. She stared at it as though it were a trap. "It's yours," he said. "No tricks." Her stomach twisted painfully, the scent breaking her resistance. She snatched it, ready to run if he tried anything. But he didn't move, only watched her eat. Slowly, her guarded eyes flicked back to him. "Why?" she asked. Garen leaned on one knee, studying her. "Because you're a child. And children shouldn't starve." It was a simple answer, but it hit her harder than she expected. She had forgotten what it was like to be spoken to, as if she mattered. A vendor nearby was watching them, frowning. "You'll get in trouble feeding strays," the man muttered to Garen. "She's not your responsibility." Garen stood, his voice firm. "She is now." The words startled even him, but once they were out, he didn't take them back. He reached for her hand. She hesitated, glancing toward the streets where she usually vanished. But her legs felt too heavy to run. And there was something in his voice, a steadiness she had never known. She let him take her hand. His grip was warm, not crushing, not pulling too hard. He led her away from the market, past rows of stalls, and out toward the quieter roads. She didn't ask where they were going. Part of her was still waiting for the moment when he would hand her over to someone else, or leave her in a worse place. But when they reached the edge of the city, she saw the path stretch toward rolling green hills. In the distance, rows of crops shimmered under the sun. Garen's small farmhouse stood alone, smoke curling from its chimney. "This is my home," he said. "And if you want, it can be yours too," her breath caught. She didn't trust it yet, but she wanted to. No one had offered her a home since the day her parents vanished in the chaos of the border wars inside the house. The smell of soup filled the air. Garen ladled a steaming bowl and set it in front of her. She sat stiffly at the table, her fingers trembling as she held the spoon. He didn't rush her, didn't demand anything in return. For the first time in a long time, Lyra felt the sharp edge of her hunger start to fade. But even stronger than that was the strange, warm feeling blooming in her chest, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. The warmth of the soup lingered in Lyra's stomach long after she had set the empty bowl down. She had eaten slowly at first, wary of taking too much, but Garin had simply ladled more into her bowl when he saw her glancing at the pot. She had not eaten this much in months. The heaviness in her chest had eased, though the walls inside her mind stayed high. Garin moved quietly around the kitchen, putting away supplies. He didn't question her about her past, didn't demand explanations. His silence was a kind she wasn't used to, peaceful, not cold. At last he looked over and said, "You'll need a place to sleep." Lyra's shoulders tensed. A part of her was ready to be told she had to sleep outside or in a shed. Instead, he led her to a small room with a narrow bed, a patched quilt, and a window overlooking the fields. It was plain, but it was clean. "This used to be my son's room," he said quietly. "He's grown now, lives on another colony." She stood in the doorway, not stepping inside yet. "You're not sending me away?" she asked in a small voice. He shook his head. "Not unless you want to leave. You're safe here." Safe. The word felt strange on her tongue, like it didn't belong to her. She stepped inside and touched the quilt, feeling the worn fabric. "Why?" she whispered again, though she wasn't sure if she meant the room, the food, or the kindness. Garin didn't answer right away. He leaned against the doorframe, his weathered face softening. "Because I've seen too many children left behind. I couldn't save them all, but I can save one." That night, Lyra lay under the quilt, staring at the wooden ceiling. The silence was different from the city's. No shouts, no engines, no cold wind slipping through cracks in the walls. Only the faint hum of the old heater and the distant call of night insects. She wanted to believe she was safe, but safety felt like a trick that could vanish at any moment. The next morning, Garin woke her early. "Come on," he said, handing her a pair of worn boots. "We've got work to do," she frowned, clutching the boots. "Work? Work," he repeated with a small smile. "If you're going to live here, you'll learn to take care of." The land, outside, the sun had just begun to warm the horizon. The fields stretched in neat rows, leaves glistening with dew. Lyra followed him to the garden where small shoots pushed through the soil. He showed her how to pull weeds without harming the roots, how to check the leaves for signs of pests. At first, her fingers were clumsy. She snapped a few stems by accident and muttered an apology. Garin only chuckled. "Plants are forgiving if you treat them right. You'll get the hang of it." Hours passed and her hands grew dirty, her boots caked in soil. But there was something strangely calming about the work. She hadn't realized how long it had been since she'd done anything that wasn't just surviving. The air smelled of earth and green things, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a little less like she was disappearing. When they paused for water, Garin sat on the edge of a planter. "You're strong," he said. Most kids would have given up after the first hour. She didn't know how to respond. Praise was something she wasn't used to hearing. Instead, she sipped her water and asked, "Why don't the others help?" "You? Others? The people in the city. You could sell your crops there. Why not have help?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "The city has its own rules. People there, they look after themselves first. Out here, I can work my way without anyone telling me who's worth saving and who isn't." She thought about that for a long moment. It made sense in a way she couldn't explain. The city had taught her the same thing. No one came for you unless they wanted something in return. Over the next few days, the rhythm of Garin's farm began to sink into her bones. Mornings in the fields, afternoons repairing tools or fetching water, evenings eating simple meals by the fire. She still kept her guard up, still slept with one hand curled under her pillow, ready to run. But each day, her grip on that readiness loosened a little. One afternoon, as they were planting new seeds, a shadow passed overhead. Lyra froze, her gaze snapping upward. A small patrol craft was circling, its engines whining in the sky. Her pulse raced. She had seen those ships before, city enforcers who took street children away for their own good. Garen noticed her. Fear. He placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "They won't bother us out here," he said firmly. "Not unless we give them reason to." But she didn't miss the way his eyes followed the craft until it vanished over the horizon. That night, she lay awake, staring out the window. The stars glittered above the dark fields. She wanted to trust him, to believe this little farmhouse could keep her safe from the things that had hunted her in the city. But deep down, she knew shadows had long arms, and the quiet she had found here might not last forever. Morning light spilled across the fields, glinting off the dew like tiny stars. Lyra was already outside, kneeling in the dirt and loosening soil around a row of sprouting greens. Her hands no longer trembled from hunger, though they still carried the faint shakiness of someone expecting to be pulled away at any moment. Garen emerged from the farmhouse with 2 mugs of steaming tea, one of which he set down beside her. "Start the day warm," he said, his voice gruff but gentle. She took the mug carefully, sipping the bittersweet liquid. It warmed her throat and chased away the morning chill. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to feel like she belonged here. But her eyes kept darting to the sky, searching for the faint hum of engines. The patrol ship had not returned since that afternoon, but its shadow still hung in her mind. Garen noticed. "You're thinking about them again." She didn't answer right away. "They take kids," she said at last. "Say they'll look after them. But they don't. I've seen what happens. They put you to work in the barracks until you're old enough to fight." His jaw tightened. "They won't touch you while I'm breathing." She wanted to believe him, but she'd learned long ago that promises often broke under pressure. Still, there was something about Garen's voice, steady, unflinching, that made her want to believe. Later that day, Garen hitched up his old cargo hauler. "We're going into town," he told her. Her stomach knotted. "Why?" "Need more seed and some tools fixed. You'll come with me." "Safer than leaving you alone." The ride into town was quiet. Lyra sat low in the passenger seat, her eyes scanning every corner. The bustling streets felt overwhelming after the quiet of the farm. People called out prices, carts rattled past, and the scent of spices and cooked meat filled the air. At the market, Garen moved with purpose, haggling with vendors and loading supplies. Lyra stayed close, keeping her head down. But her gaze caught on a group of uniformed enforcers near the far end of the square. They weren't looking her way yet. Then one of them turned and their eyes locked. The man's expression sharpened. He murmured something to his partner, and they began walking toward her. Lyra's pulse exploded in her ears. She stepped back, bumping into Garen. "They saw me," she whispered. Garen didn't glance at the enforcers. He set down the crate in his hands and took hers. "Follow my lead," he said quietly. Instead of hurrying away, he strolled toward the food stalls, stopping to taste samples and chat with vendors. Lyra forced herself to match his pace, though every step felt like a lifetime. The enforcers trailed them, weaving between shoppers. At a corner near a spice cellar, Garen leaned close and murmured, "When I tell you, run." Her throat was dry. "Run where?" "Back to the hauler. Don't stop." They turned down a narrow lane lined with empty crates. Garen suddenly shoved one over, spilling produce across the path. The enforcers stumbled, cursing. "Now!" Garen barked. Lyra bolted. Her small frame darted through the crowd, weaving between stalls. Behind her, she heard shouts and the pounding of boots. The hauler came into view, parked at the edge of the square. She scrambled inside, heart hammering, and slid down behind the seat. Moments later, Garen appeared, tossing the last crate of goods into the back. He climbed in, started the engine, and drove without a word until the city's noise faded behind them. Only when the field stretched out ahead did he speak. "You did well." Her hands still shook. "They knew me. They'll come again." He nodded slowly. "Then we'll be ready." Back at the farm, Garen stashed the supplies inside before stepping to a small storage shed. Lyra followed him. Inside, she saw a lawn-covered shape resting on the workbench. He pulled back the cloth to reveal an old but well-kept plasma rifle. "This land isn't much," he said, checking the weapon's charge. "But it's mine, and I'll defend it." She stared at the rifle, a knot forming in her chest. Part of her wanted to run far away, not bring trouble to him. But another part, the part that remembered nights on the streets, with no one to stand beside her, clung to the idea that maybe she didn't have to face danger alone this time. That evening, they worked side by side in the fields until the sun sank low. The air was warm, the sky streaked with gold and violet. For a moment, Lyra allowed herself to imagine a life where this peace could last. But as night fell, she noticed Garen moving the rifle closer to the door. His eyes scanned the horizon more often. The farm still felt safe, but the shadow of the patrols was creeping closer. And both of them knew it was only a matter of time before the quiet they'd built was tested. The days that followed passed in a tense calm. Lyra continued working the fields with Garen, planting seeds, pulling weeds, and repairing the old irrigation lines. The rhythm of farm life kept her hands busy, but her eyes always wandered to the sky. She couldn't forget the cold stare of the enforcer in the market, nor the way they had followed her. Garen didn't talk much about it, but she noticed how his gaze swept the horizon more often, and how the plasma rifle was never far from reach. One evening, while the sun bled red across the hills, Garen was repairing a fence post when he stopped mid-swing of his hammer. Lyra saw his head tilt slightly, his eyes narrowing toward the far road. "What is it?" she asked, her voice low. He didn't answer right away. "Dust," he said finally, pointing. In the fading light, a thin cloud of dirt rose from the road. Beyond the fields, too much for just the wind. Her stomach tightened. "Patrol, maybe." His voice had hardened. "Go inside, lock the door. Don't open it unless it's me." She wanted to argue, to stay and help, but the tone in his voice made her move. Inside the farmhouse, she bolted the door and pressed her ear to the wooden frame. Through the small side window, she saw them 3 patrol crafts rolling up the dirt road, their engines rumbling low. Each one carried 2 uniformed enforcers. Garen stood by the gate, his posture calm but solid. When the craft stopped, the leader stepped out, a tall alien with pale skin and sharp ridges along his jaw. His uniform was spotless, his boots polished. "Evening," Garen said. His voice steadied. The alien's eyes swept the farm. "We've had reports of a fugitive child from the city," he said. "Blue skin, small, alone. We believe she came this way." "Not here," Garen replied without hesitation. The alien's mouth twitched in something between a smile and a sneer. "We'll see for ourselves." He motioned for 2 enforcers to approach the house. Inside, Lyra's heart pounded. She backed away from the door, glancing toward the back exit. Running crossed her mind, but she knew it would only lead them straight to her. Outside, Garen stepped into the path of the approaching enforcers. "You don't have a warrant," he said. "We don't need one," the leader replied. "By order of the city authority, all private properties may be searched in the pursuit of missing minors." Garen's voice dropped low. "Not on my land, you don't." The leader's smile vanished. "Are you refusing to cooperate?" "Call it what you like," Garen said. His hand was near the plasma rifle leaning against the fence post. The air grew tight. The enforcers hesitated, sensing the shift. Garen's stance was that of a man who wouldn't hesitate if pushed. Inside the house, Lyra crouched low, peering. Through a crack in the curtain, she saw the alien leader studying Garen, weighing whether the trouble was worth it. Finally, the alien stepped back. "We'll be watching you, human," he said. "And if we find out you're hiding her, there will be consequences." Garen didn't move as they returned to their crafts and turned back toward the road. Only when the sound of engines faded did he step inside. "You didn't run?" he asked, seeing her near the window. She shook her head. "You told me to stay." A small, almost invisible smile tugged at his lips. "Good, you listened." That night neither of them slept much. Garen kept the rifle by his chair, watching the fields from the front porch. Lyra sat by the window in her room, eyes scanning the darkness dot in the quiet hours before dawn. She spoke softly through the open door. "They'll come back." "Maybe," he said from his chair. "But they'll find I'm harder to push around than they think." The words settled in her chest, warming a place that had been cold for years. For the first time since she had met him, she began to believe that maybe he wouldn't give her up no matter the cost. Still, as the first light of morning touched the fields, she couldn't shake the feeling that their time was running out. The patrols had left, but they had marked this place. And marks like that were rarely forgotten. 3 days passed without a sign of the patrols. The farm fell back into its routine fields to tend, fences to repair, meals to share. But neither Garen nor Lyra believed the quiet would last. There was a tension in the air, like the stillness before a storm. Garen kept the rifle close, his eyes always on the horizon. Lyra, despite her small frame, began carrying a small hand tool everywhere she went, just in case. On the 4th morning, the storm came. It began with the distant hum of engines, low and steady, growing louder by the minute. Lyra was in the garden, pulling weeds when she froze. Garen emerged from the barn, already scanning the skies. Inside, now. She obeyed without a word, sprinting to the farmhouse and locking the door. From the window, she saw them 5 patrol crafts this time, not 3, moving in tight formation down the dirt road. The lead craft bore the same pale-skinned alien, commander from before. This time, he didn't look like he had come to talk. The crafts fanned out, blocking every exit from the property. Armed enforcers spilled out, weapons slung across their shoulders. Garen stood alone at the gate, the rifle in his hands. His stance was steady, his voice calm when he spoke. "You've brought more friends this time," he called out. The alien commander stepped forward, his boots kicking up dust. "We're done asking nicely. Hand over the girl, and we'll leave you and your farm intact." "She's not yours to take," Garen said. "She's a fugitive," the commander snapped. "Property of the city." Garen's jaw tightened. "No child is property." The commander's eyes narrowed. He raised his hand, signaling his enforcers forward. "Search the house. If the human interferes, shoot him." Lyra's chest tightened. Through the window, she saw the enforcers moving. Closer. She could run out the back, maybe make it to the hills, but Garen would be alone against all of them. Her hands trembled on the WINDOWSI. Then she heard it. Garen's voice, loud and cutting through the air. "Step 1 foot on my land, and you'll regret it." The enforcers paused. The commander sneered. "You wouldn't dare." Garen's answer was the hum of the plasma rifle charging. The sound was sharp, dangerous, and unmistakable. The first enforcer to move forward stopped instantly. "This isn't city ground," Garen said. "It's mine, and I'll defend it." The commander's lip curled. "You're outnumbered." "Maybe," Garen replied, "but I'm not outmatched." The standoff hung in the air, every breath heavy. Lyra's heart pounded so hard she thought it would break her ribs. She wanted to yell for him to stop, to avoid the fight, but her voice refused to come. One of the younger enforcers shifted nervously. Sir, maybe we should— Quiet, the commander snapped. He stepped forward until he was only a few meters from Garen. Last chance, move aside. Garen's rifle never wavered. Not happening. The commander studied him for a long moment, then laughed a short, humorless sound. You're a fool, human. Protecting her will cost you everything. Then I'll pay the price, Garen said. Something in his voice made even the enforcers hesitate. It wasn't bluster. It was certainty. The commander's smile faded. With a sharp motion, he signaled his troops back. Fine, keep her. For now. But when the city comes for you, and it will, don't expect mercy. The crafts lifted off, engines screaming against the morning air. Dust swirled through the yard until they were specks on the horizon. Only then did Garen lower the rifle. He turned toward the house, his expression unreadable. Lyra burst from the doorway and ran to him. You didn't have to, she began. But he stopped her with a shake of his head. Yes, I did, he said. You're not going back to that life. Her throat tightened. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt too small for what he had done. Instead, she simply stood beside him as they looked out over the empty road. The danger wasn't gone. If anything, it had grown. The commander's threat wasn't idle. Lyra knew the city would send more, maybe even soldiers instead of patrols. But for now, they had held their ground. And for the first time in years, she felt like someone saw her not as a burden, not as property, but as a person worth fighting for. The farm felt quieter than ever in the days after the standoff, but it wasn't a peaceful quiet. Garen and Lyra both knew it was the kind of stillness that came before something bigger, heavier, and impossible to ignore. Garen spent more time checking the perimeter fences and cleaning the rifle than tending the crops. Lyra tried to keep to her tasks, but she caught herself glancing toward the road every few minutes. On the sixth day, she woke before dawn to the sound of engines. Not one or two dozens. The deep, steady roar rolled across the hills like a coming storm. She slipped out of bed and ran to the front window. A dark line moved along the horizon, growing larger with each second. It wasn't just patrol crafts this time. These were armored transports, the kind used for military deployments. Garen was already on the porch, his silhouette framed by the faint blue of early morning. He didn't turn when she stepped outside. It's them, he said. Her voice came. Out small, we can run. They'd catch us before we reached the hills, he replied. If we leave now, we lose the farm. And you'll never be safe again. The first transports reached the road leading to the gate. They stopped in formation, the engines rumbling like growling beasts. The pale-skinned commander from before stepped out of the lead vehicle, flanked by soldiers in full armor. This ends today, the commander called out. Hand her over and we'll let you live. Garen stepped down from the porch, rifle in hand. You're trespassing, he said calmly. Leave now, the commander laughed, a cold, humorless sound. You think you can fight all of us? I don't need to fight all of you, Garen replied. Just the ones foolish enough to cross this gate. The commander's hand rose, and soldiers began to advance. Garen's rifle hummed as he powered it on. The first soldier crossed the boundary, and Garen fired. The plasma bolt struck the ground inches from the soldier's feet, the flash and heat forcing him back. I said leave, Garen repeated, his voice sharp enough to cut the air. Soldiers hesitated, but the commander barked, forward. This time, they came in a rush. Garen moved with a precision Lyra hadn't seen before, firing warning shots that hit close enough to stop their charge without killing. He knew exactly how far to push without crossing a line that would bring the full force of the city down on them immediately, but numbers were against him. As he reloaded, two soldiers broke away from the group and moved toward the side of the house. Lyra's heart slammed in her chest. She ran inside, grabbed the small hand tool she kept by the door, and slipped out the back. She caught them near the barn. One reached for her, and she swung with all the strength she had, hitting his arm hard enough to make him drop his weapon. Garen's voice rang out from the front, but she didn't stop. She darted toward the fields, forcing the soldiers to follow her away from the house. Garen turned at the sound of the chase. "Lyra!" he shouted, breaking from the line to follow. The distraction was enough for the soldiers at the gate to falter, unsure whether to push forward or hold there. Ground Lyra ran until the fields opened into a narrow gully. She slid down the slope, landing hard, and turned to see the soldiers still coming. Garen arrived moments later, rifle raised. His presence made them stop. "You touch her, and you won't walk back to your commander," Garen said. His tone was steady, but there was a weight behind it that froze the soldiers where they stood. After a long, tense pause, they turned and retreated toward the road. Moments later, the commander's voice carried over the wind. "This isn't over, human." The transports pulled away, their engines fading into the distance. Garen lowered the rifle and looked at Lyra. "You okay?" She nodded, though her chest still heaved. "You didn't have to, you." "Yes, I did," he said firmly. "And I'll keep doing it, as long as it takes." Back at the farmhouse, the day passed in a strange quiet. The danger wasn't gone. But the city had learned something. Garen would not bend. And Lyra was not alone anymore. That evening, they sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the hills. Lyra leaned against his arm, and for the first time since she could remember, she felt certain of something. Whatever came next, they would face it together. She wasn't just a hungry, forgotten child anymore. She was someone's family. And nothing, not the city, not the patrols, not even an army, could take that away.